You were 13 running around the punk scene in New York. How was that even possible? Like what was life like that allowed you to have that much freedom to run free in the city at that time?
I mean, I didn't have a lot of parental guidance, to be honest. My mom was very liberal and also was dealing with her own issues. And so, there wasn't a lot of parental guidance within my house. So I kind of did what I wanted to do. I didn't really like, people would say, I was outside. Like I was outside from when I was like 11, 12 years old. Like I was out the house, like doing shit. So, and I gravitated towards hanging out with older kids pretty young. And that's another reason why I probably didn't really I didn't talk too much shit till I got older because I was young and the older dudes would check you if you did. So, I was around and also New York was a different place then. It was relatively lawless. The drinking age was 18.
Mhm.
And I think the drinking age was if you were taller than the bar, you could probably go in a bar and get a drink. And I grew up in the East Village, which was a pretty scandalous little area. Kind of, how can I say, lawless, and it's where punk rock happened. And it's ironic in a sense because it's also a Puerto Rican neighborhood. It's the hood. There's two big hoods in Manhattan, really, and that's Harlem and the Lower East Side. There's other hoods, but those are the big ones. So within this Latin kind of hood, punk rock emerges. And there was like the East Village and the Lower East Side, which are right next to each other, but a little different. So the alphabets is when it becomes the Lower East Side, and before it gets to Avenue A, it's the East Village. So I mean, I grew up in a really crazy, somewhat dangerous yet very artistic environment. So man, I was out of the crib, hanging out, whether it was the schoolyard or going to see bands as young as 13, 14 years old.
So in that environment, that dangerous, lawless chaos, and you find yourself steeped in the punk scene, how do you ultimately end up finding hip hop? How does hip hop find you?
So hip hop was all for as long as I can remember, punk rock, new wave, and even hardcore, the adjacent culture that was cool. And one thing about punk rock was while punk rock wanted to destroy the Led Zeppelins of the world, black music always had a past. Rick
Mm.
James in his leather pants and his crazy shit doing Super Freak was still cool to punk rockers, right? So there's how can I say, an unspoken cool that is attached to black culture and black music. So it was never alien from any punk rock scene that I was involved in. And we always, like in England, they listen to dub music. And in America, certainly we listen to some early dancehall and roots and culture stuff, and even some dub stuff. But rap music was right there, and we liked it. And whether it was starting with the Sugar Hill Gang, Rapper's Delight in junior high school, I always liked rap music. I thought it was cool. I liked that record a lot, and I liked a lot of those records in that time period, whether it was Apache or later Super Rhymes
Yes, I'm one of a kind. I'm super rhymes and I'd like to say hello.
or Dollar Bill. Any of these records, The Message, White Lines, these records all spoke to me and my friends, and it was not uncommon for us to go to a club like Danceteria, and they play a lot of rap music along the new wave records. And
Hmm.
the other thing was our favorite band growing up, the band we always went to see was the Bad Brains. So the Bad Brains were, four black guys from Washington D.C. So I think some of the walls that existed in other punk rock scenes did not exist in New York City, where I was, because the
Hmm.
apex of our scene was a black roster group that played the greatest hardcore music ever. So for us, I think some of the lines and the lines and distinctions didn't exist. And I grew up on black music. My sister loved black music. My mom loved Bill Withers and James Brown and Aretha Franklin. As my father loved jazz. So, rap music, when it started to emerge, it just seemed logical that I would like it, and lots of kids. And the other thing was, punk rock took a turn towards what they call hardcore punk rock, and it got kind of outer boroughish, and for lack of a better word, people who I didn't think were our intellectual equals started to show up at the scene, and it reminded me of stuff I was trying to get away from, right? So I found punk rock because shit was dangerous where I was living, and it was like a way to find something else. It was like to have my own, to be part of our own subculture. And when our subculture was infiltrated by people who didn't have the same artistic sensibilities as us, it was time to find something else. And for a lot of us, I think that new thing, that new religion we found was hip hop.
Hmm. So it sounds like there was a lot of mutual respect and openness in the punk scene that you were a
There
part
was.
of
I
to
would say
allow.
that punk people were probably more open minded and intrigued by early rap music and hip hop culture than the inverse. That the other thing is, look, we have Blondie who's reaching out to the world of hip hop culture and acknowledging it, and we have Graffiti, which is the great like
Polarizing, yeah.
connector, right? It like because Graffiti was like white guys, black dudes, guys who were doing Black Sabbath cars on trains, but then dudes who was rapping, right? So
Right,
and in a Graffiti crew, there might be a big white dude from like Far Rockaway, and then your man who's from the projects in East New York, and we're in the same crew. So that's the
right.
other thing. And as Graffiti becomes more bona fidely a part of my life and becomes maybe more socially acceptable as a real art form, you have this liberal, forward-thinking element in New York City, and I think probably globally, but particularly New York City, that embraces this stuff and sees the real artistry in it,
Mhm.
and sees that trains are works of art when put in the hands of people like Lee and Futura, and that the music, rap music, is akin in a sense to punk rock. It's black do-it-yourself music with no
Mhm.
instruments, but turntables, right, et cetera. And what could be more punk rock than say, "Fuck your instruments. I got this shit right here," right? So
Right.
I think that there was a logical connection between the two cultures back then. At least it felt very logical to me. And look, man, all the forward-thinking kids who I was hanging out with, and we were multicultural. There was white, Asian, Spanish, black, female, lots of women around, young women and forward-thinking men. We all gravitated towards this thing called hip hop because it was fun, man. It was fun. It wasn't tough. It was
Mhm.
it was a lot of fun to it and almost an innocence. So it appealed to all of us. We loved all those records, and we all made tapes for each other and had those records. And we at some point started going to we went to the grill early on, me and my friends, like, which would be like Mike D and these guys, and the girls who were in Luscious Jackson were around, and others. And we gravitated towards the Roxy when the party moved there. So I was in the early wave of hip downtown kids who were touched by the culture of hip hop. And I always say hip hop was, much like rock and roll, the most important youth culture since rock and roll. And I would think that its longevity says its import was probably more so than even punk rock. But you're a kid, you're looking for something that you want to call your own, and hip hop fit the bill.
Thanks for watching that. And if you dug that, leave a thumbs up and say what up in the comments. And make sure to subscribe to Stony Island Audio for more.